All right. So the reason that you're probably watching this video, maybe because you are a newer person in the life insurance world, maybe you've been in the industry for a while, maybe you've hit a plateau and you're figuring out and just looking at different ways in which you can, in your own practice, in your own business, in your own agency, whatever this looks like, be more effective or teach those within your charge to be more effective. And that's kind of the situation I'm in right now. I work for a company called Better Wealth, and with that said, we want intentional living to be the new wealth standard, right? Because I would think a lot of times what happens is, uh, you know, your bank account, the rate of return, whatever is the standard, and it's like you're comparing yourself against others. But that aside, what I'm realizing is within Better Wealth, I lead the sales department specifically when it comes to life insurance and a few other things as well. And we've done well up to this point. We've been blessed by the grace of God, praise Him. And at the same time, I feel like there's been so many opportunities that we have missed, and I think it has less to do with people just really didn't want it to begin with, but more to do with sales ability. And so my job up to this point, and what I've actually coached my team to do so far, was all right, get clear on what people want and why they want it. Like, I think that's incredibly important. And so it's not to say that I'm going to be going away from that, but what I've noticed in the way that I've in the way in that sort of approach is I've kind of talked to my team about what are the core reasons why people want life insurance, and then you speak to that reason. And I don't think that's, illegitimate. I don't think it's going to take away from all of your sales or anything like that. But at the same time, I think what that ends up doing is putting a hyper focus, even if we didn't really realize it, is putting a hyper focus on uh, the product in itself and the features of the product, as opposed to putting the focus on the prospect in and of themselves, and the problems that they have. And so, what I came to realize just by going through some sales training, outside of the company that I work with, Better Wealth, I realized that every single core reason that I used to coach about, why people want high cash value, overfunded, whole life insurance, all of those core reasons why people want it, those can all be pivoted or combined into just core problems that people have. Because I think until you understand the problem that people have, and your prospects understand that they also have a problem, there's not you can't you're pretty much kind of throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping it sticks, from a standpoint of, I hope I say the right thing in order to get them to a point where they do want to buy. And I will be fully transparent. We have a pretty decent sized YouTube following. We have one channel with over 40,000, almost 45,000 maybe subscribers, something like that. And then we have another YouTube channel with over 10,000 subscribers, right? People come to us all the time. So I get that we're getting a lot of inbound leads. And my thought that I had was, okay, when you have people who are interested, like actually interested, to a point where they book on your calendar, and yet you still don't close them, or like you still don't serve them by getting them the policy they wanted, that means that they came to you with a problem that they believe that you could solve in some way. They were convinced of themselves, but then for whatever reason, they were not persuaded enough to move them to a point where they actually purchased the policy. In other words, they had a problem, we could solve it. They left without solving the problem because they didn't purchase the solution that we could offer them. And so it's like, how do we close that gap? And the way that we close that gap is by widening the gap from a standpoint of where they are now versus where they want to be. And the only way that you can get to a place, that I've learned so far, that you can get to a place where that gap becomes widened, ultimately just boils down to you starting with knowing what the problems are and speaking to the problem, and framing your questions with that problem in mind and at the forefront during the conversations as well. So I'm gonna move my face out of the way here. Just wanted to just highlight what's on the screen. This is just my notion that I've just kind of been taking all my notes in and whatnot when it comes to these new training, when it comes to sales. So overall, if you answer these 5 questions, then and only then can any kind of new sales program that you may purchase will land and actually be effective for you. Otherwise, again, you're kind of throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping it sticks. And I think in the sales program that I purchased, they called that our company purchased, they called it hopium. In other words, you opium is not a good thing, that right? Opioids are not a good thing. And same thing when it comes to hoping that your words are going to stick as well. So huge intro. Sorry about that. I think it's really long. Maybe I'll wrap that up, tighten it in another video, but I just wanted to keep this going free flowing here. So, first, these are the top 5 questions. What problems do you solve? What are the root causes of those problems? How do those problems affect your prospects personally? What are the consequences of not solving said problems? And then how does your solution actually solve the problem? And so for us who are selling high cash value whole life insurance, and we're so happy to be speaking to people who are somewhat interested or super duper interested, I've had experiences, and every single person on my team has had experiences where someone like is incredibly interested. They go to underwriting, and all of a sudden, you don't hear them anymore, hear from them anymore. And so I think it's because we hadn't been speaking to the problem, we've been speaking to the solution, and too many of the just the features that come with it. And so I broke it down into 4 core problems. And just to give you an idea of like what the core reasons were, like one of the core reasons that I would coach my team on is like, I want a private line of credit, right? Or that's where person would say, I just want a private line of credit. And there's nothing wrong with that. But again, that can be phrased in the form of a problem. And we'll hop into that right here. So the core problem number one, like these are stated in such a way that these are the emotions that are coming out of a prospect as they come to us or before they come to us, right? So my money, I just don't feel like my money feels safe. I don't feel like it's accessible. Like that's core problem number one. And so some of the things that they're actually saying are, I'm just tired of losing money in the market, quite honestly, or I want more control of my money. I don't want to be locking it away because I feel like I can go do more with that money than it just being stored away in 401k, IRA, whatever that may be. I want my money to be liquid. I don't want it sitting in a bank, just idle. That's another thing that people may say. And so one of those situations to where they they see safety, they like safety, but they notice with safety there's no growth, or at least not very sustainable growth. And so that's the problem. The root cause of many of these problems is like people are it just boils down to what people are taught about money. Put it into volatile markets, put it into qualified plans like 401ks, IRAs, traditional bank accounts. Like none of these things in and of themselves are inherently bad things by any stretch of the imagination. But the big problem lies in going back to they don't want those things anymore. They feel like there's something better out there and they want the safety, but they also want the accessibility as well. And that's what our solution can provide. So that's kind of the root cause. Now, the personal impact it has on them is a whole nother story, right? So it's like, how does this problem affect them emotionally? How does it affect them practically? And so you can say personally and all that, but sometimes it's not going to be super personal per se, but it can strike a chord in them emotionally. It can strike a chord in them from a practical standpoint because people want to make a change and their fear of of staying the same or fear of future pain is really what it boils down to. And so perhaps so the personal impact of this is like, look, they're anxious about market downturns. They might have to delay pretty sizable, incredible opportunities in business, in real estate, things like that, because their money isn't accessible, right? It's locked up in a traditional IRA or 401k or whatever that may be. They experience kind of decision fatigue because every single move that they make feels like they're not going to be able to go back to where they were before. It's going to be irreversible, or they may be feeling like, man, it's just such a high risk. I mean, I'm not even going to take any action on it. Um, and so which can just lead to them mentally being actually drained. So that can really affect them personally. And some people are just hoarding cash. They're fearful. Like it's not working for them, but at the same time, they don't want it dropping in value from a standpoint of what the dollar value looks like. And so they just store it in a place that really isn't doing anything for them. And so they really have a big personal impact on them in that particular case. And so there's this tension between what they really want to feel, right? And them actually just being stuck because they can't accomplish that yet. So there's that. Now there's also consequences of them not taking action on the thing that on about the problem that they actually have. And so what happens if they don't solve it? They'll continue to potentially lose sleep or always be thinking about it, have high levels of anxiety, not show up powerfully for their family, not be fully present because they're thinking about all the stuff that comes with work, all the busyness of family life, but then they also have like they're thinking about the future as well, and it just bothers them, it worries them, right? And so they feel like maybe their capital is just going to be inefficient. Like it's either going to be exposed or it's going to be idle. Those are my only two options. I have nothing else I can do here, right? That's a consequence of an action. If another consequence is that they end up missing out on opportunities to plan generationally, or opportunities to really bolster their wealth because of a business or because some sort of an investment, right? Or they can't really be a blessing for family things, and that's like a cost of inaction because they just feel like I got to keep my money. I can't do anything. So that's like a cost or a consequence of them not repositioning their money into high cash value life insurance, especially when the core problem was my money doesn't feel safe, my money doesn't feel accessible. Okay. Now, obviously, we know how our problem solves, sorry, how our solution solves these problems. So we know that the principal is guaranteed, the cash value is liquid, the growth is going to be steady, literally no downturns within high cash value life insurance. It's not meant to be a high rate of return sort of product. It should be more compared to savings accounts, which it tends to blow out of the water over the medium and long term. But then also, comparing it to things like bonds. And then other safe assets is really what it should be compared to. That growth is steady. And of course, it's protected by contract. So these are like some of the features that we would tend to start with when really we should be starting with the problem in and of itself. Now, this video I could keep going because we have things like the core problem number two, I'm just not building wealth efficiently. Or core problem number three, I just feel like my future from a financial standpoint, I just, something about it, just feels really uncertain. Like it's either this or that. And I don't know what's really going to happen. Or core problem number four, I don't have any real plan for legacy. Right. And we can get into all of these in probably future videos, but I don't want this video to be any longer than it already is. But just know this. This is where we would start before. Now we're starting with the problem. These are all the features of the product that we sell, the things that people actually do want, which will solve their problem. But do people make decisions based on emotion, or do they make decisions based on logic? They make decision based on emotions, right? I think a lot of times in the financial space, people feel like if I just show them all the cool things that I learned from my manager, they're gonna buy from me. And I go, no, they're not. Like they will, maybe one or two times out of every 10, right? Maybe. But if I personally, I'm gonna speak for myself because really I'm recording this video for myself and whoever watches it, praise God. But like if people leave without the solution, you're not really solving their problem. And if we can go from, I have to know the exact numbers, but let's just make up numbers here. Let's say instead of going from 5 or 6 out of every 10 that we send to underwriting, going in going in closing, why not 8 or 9, or even have seasons where it's 10 for 10? So that's just the purpose of this video. And ultimately, it's just a matter of like we have to get our mindset from and salespeople as like out of service, out of just like this whole idea of um, the solution, and way more into like how does um, how do we have a conversation that revolves around the problem in and of itself, and build that gap so that they feel the internal tension about needing to change and wanting to make that change and solve that problem by working with you.